Because I think pride and ego can look really similar from the outside, but it's when something uncomfortable shows up that they start to behave completely differently.
Pride is, we're amazing and we want to be better. Tell us how to be better. And ego is, we're amazing and there's nothing you can tell me that I'm not already doing or aware of.
We kind of framed it a little bit as this brand ego, right? Like us, we're the best, this company, that company. Do you think that retail executives don't include store teams in that us?
Wow. I'm having 6,000 simultaneous thoughts.
Man, this has come up a number of times. I think the first time it came up was season 1, episode 6, the job ads episode. And you always add some wording around it that's like, I don't know quite how to describe this phenomenon or articulate it yet, but I think the time has come where we try and get closer to understanding what this is. Although I do think you got pretty close in the job ads one. So here's what you said.
Every company has its own internal ego about itself, right? I think that's somewhat necessary for a company to be successful, is to be like, we're the best and we're the greatest coffee shop, or we're the greatest clothing company, or whatever it is. But that ego prevents companies sometimes from seeing their own flaws. It also is why internally you'll sometimes not be appreciated for bringing up those flaws, because they're like, but we're the greatest. As if that means you can't also have flaws.
I think that's pretty well said. And I've been sitting with that. And I've also gone over some of our previous recordings to see if we can get a little bit closer to naming it and why it's something that sticks with you the way it does. And I think where I've landed, the reason it's been hard to name, like you called it ego, is because it's not just ego on its own. It's those moments where that necessary and maybe healthy pride tips into ego. Because I think pride and ego can look really similar from the outside, but it's when something uncomfortable shows up that they start to behave completely differently. So that was a lot, but here's the framing I want to try on you today about pride versus ego. So pride is rooted in actual work, accomplishment. It can absorb difficult feedback because the work is the point and the feedback makes the work better. Mm-hmm. Ego is rooted in the story a company tells itself, identity, and any feedback that complicates that story feels like an attack that has to be deflected or dismissed or reframed, because with ego, the story is the point, not the work or the impact. I think pride is earned and ego is asserted. I think pride is open and ego is defensive. I think pride is realistic and ego can be aspirational. And I think pride is resilient and ego is fragile. Mm-hmm. And then once I started to think about it through that lens, you can start to see where companies cross it. And these are stories you've told me, right? From the job ads episode, it was when the job ads start to read aspirationally instead of honestly, because the ego won't let its company say anything about the company needing to be improved. It's why customers with legitimate complaints get labeled as unreasonable, because ego paints them that way. It can't actually accept that a decision was made that maybe wasn't the best decision. And it's why employees who raise concerns or who leave get cast as not one of us, outsiders, couldn't hack it, because the ego can't hold the possibility that the company might have been the problem. All that said, general feedback, how does that land for you?
No, that feels right. I mean, I think episode ended. Yeah. No, you nailed that. And I think the other thing that complicates it, that came to mind as you were kind of going through these where pride tips into ego, is I think the same thing happens with leadership at all levels. It can happen with store managers too, where their pride tips into ego. and then sort of has this like almost like DNA helix like dance with the company ego itself. So now you're actually trying to speak a truth about retention or customers or the product or a job ad. And now not only are you coming face to face with like an entity ego, you're coming face to face with like the VP who's actually intertwined their identity with the brand identity. And now they're defending it or dismissing it from this place of ego that is both their own and the collective, which I think then makes it even more complicated, and all leads to just people not being heard. Because I think that's the other thing. Pride is, we're amazing and we want to be better. Tell us how to be better. And ego is, we're amazing and there's nothing you can tell me that I'm not already doing or aware of or gonna be or am currently.
Yeah. So it's come up a few times. I'm curious to know why. Personally, what is the impact on you?
I think personally the impact is, and I'm not, I'm not saying this makes me, better or worse than anyone else, but I think my pride is actually often intertwined with company pride. Any friend of mine will tell you that especially when I get a new job, I become the most obnoxious evangelist, which I think actually would shock a lot of people who I've worked with in the past, for various reasons, because I'm kind of outspoken about what I think could be better or change. But I have a lot of pride in where I work and the companies that I've chosen to join. And I join them because I really believe in what they're doing. And my pride is intertwined with the pride I have for the product or for the people or whatever. And I think where the ego problem shows up for me is we're speaking different languages, but also if I'm saying to someone higher up at a brand, hey, so we keep doing this thing that's really failing our people, and I think we could do better. And their ego and the company ego are doing that dance, and then I'm being dismissed. There's the obvious, I feel dismissed, I don't feel heard, and that's its own thing, and I feel like I have spoken about that. But I think the deeper thing is, now I'm on the defense, because now I have to prove to you that I like the company, which is an exhausting position to put someone in when they do like the company and they're like, because what are you going to say? If I didn't like it, I wouldn't be here. Like, because that doesn't sound real, because most people stay in jobs they hate all the time. I mean, I'm not one of them. Look at my resume. It's a roadmap of being over it. And so I really won't stay somewhere I'm unhappy. So if I'm saying to you, hey, we could do better, it's truly coming from a place of, I want us to be better. I believe we could be better. I love it so much that I just want it to be something I love even more. And so how that sort of impacts me personally is, again, dismissed and unheard, but also I'm now in this weird place where I'm like, so I just shouldn't say anything. So you don't, because if I say anything, you're going to think I hate the company. And now I have to do this fake ass thing that I hate, where I have to do like, I try not to do it because it actually betrays my own self internally. And I try not to do that as best as I can. But then I have to do that thing where I go, but you know what I really liked? I really liked that thing we changed about whatever. And I hate the way I sound. I hate saying it. But then I feel like I have to, because like I have to like give you a prop because now your ego is wounded and I have to like patch that up for you. And that shouldn't be my job as a store manager at all. That's for your partner, your therapist, maybe shareholders if you want. I don't know, but it shouldn't be me.
Yeah. It sounds like there's so many layers to that. So it sounds like one, it's robbing you and your team of the opportunity to further build your foundation of pride. Because if pride is, grounded in the work and the impact, it's not letting you make suggestions. It's not letting you strengthen it or make improvements. Another one is, I know you don't like being misunderstood. And it sounds like that's what it feels like to you, is like you're being perceived as a troublemaker, or maybe even like just not a team player or someone who doesn't get it, even though you're coming from a place of pride, of like brand love and pride.
I mean, that's definitely it. And I think there have been periods of my career where I actually try to own, or I've experimented with many things in my career. I mean, it's actually one of the many benefits of job hopping is sort of getting to put a new hat on without the old hat determining the future. And I've actually tried, I mean, because at this point I just treat life like a sociological experiment. And so I've tried owning the troublemaker label. To see if that will get me further. Like, well, I'm just the person who calls out the things no one else wants to hear. That doesn't get you far either. I mean, the thing that gets you the furthest is honestly, and I've mentioned this before, getting to be like number one or really high in results. And then someone's like, oh, maybe what you're sharing is real. Because, and now I feel like I'm in therapy having a breakthrough. I think because of your results in some ways, they're like, my ego is now tied into, like, I'm now doing the dance with you all about the ego.
Right.
It's not coming from a place of like attacking the company. I too am amazing and number one and would like to continue it. So maybe what I have to say is now valid, which is fascinating to me. Because also, just on a separate note, there are a lot of people who will not do what I do. And what I mean by that is like, there are people who are like, I'm not going to get to number one just so I can tell you the system's broken. It's broken. I'm just going to leave because this is dumb. And, because I actually, speaking of ego, I actually had an employee somewhat recently say something to me about like, well, do you want to be number one just basically so I could feel good about myself, like my ego? And I was like, I mean, I guess in some ways, like, but really just because I want someone to take what I'm saying seriously. And that can't happen if I'm number 7. They just don't care. And if I see a problem, I'm like, oh my God, let's fix the problem. There's a problem. We can admit there's a problem, right? Turns out, by the way, for you listening, we often can't agree that there's a problem. So if we can't agree there's a problem, then what I'm saying would come as an ego attack, right? And it's just really fascinating to me because the ego part of it is getting in the way of so much improvement and so much what people have to say. And I think even, recently I was at a meeting with a bunch of managers and, people are sharing their thoughts around company direction and leadership. And no offense to this person, but this person, he rambles a lot. And I mean, I talk a lot, but he like speaks really fast. He barely takes a breath. He's kind of hard to understand because he's not loud or super, he doesn't enunciate the way you would need to really understand. And so it's really easy to dismiss that person and be like, oh, this guy again, because hearing him is a lot, because there's definitely a more succinct way for him to share some thoughts sometimes. And he does the thing that I often do that you're good at cutting through, and he doesn't have a Becky, where he starts somewhere and you're like, where's this going? And then he sort of ends there and then he finally gets there. And then like you're on a journey. And then he says the thing. And I looked around the room at several leaders above him and they were feigning interest, but they were clearly like, oh, this guy again. Yeah. And I think it's really easy to let your ego get involved and be like, I am smarter than this person. This person is not as eloquent of a speaker, or they do not have the position that I deem necessary to have this type of insight, because he's also new to store management. But his observation was actually really astute and had really important nuggets in there of like, if someone heard this and then even changed a little bit, my God, what a better company would be, but also how much better our retention would be. But I think it's very easy to let the ego also decide this is not a voice we need to hear because we're smarter. We know better here in corporate, or here at this, some of the people in that room were 2 steps above him or 3 steps above him. So it's easy for them to be like, this is a new store manager. What does he really know? We know better. We know more. And I think that's really I'm using it again, the crux of the issue is that, and you've said it so beautifully, like the people with all the answers have none of the control. And but it's what's stopping that from happening though and being absorbed is this idea of ego that we're talking about, in my opinion. That's what's stopping the problem from being heard fully.
So do you think corporate, or at some level, this, because we kind of framed it a little bit as like this brand ego, right? Like us, mm-hmm. We're the best, this company, that company. Do you think that retail executives don't include store teams in that us?
Wow. That might be the most important question you've ever asked me.
Damn.
Because, wow. I
just got chills watching.
Like, wow. Now, really, we are in a therapy session.
Take your time.
I'm having 6,000 simultaneous thoughts because that one question actually answered many things for me. Huh. So, and the first thing that I have to say is no, unless you join the ego party.
Yeah.
So if you're a store leader who is like, we work for the best company, and they're the ones at the meeting who were like, I love this change. This is great. You are part of the us. You get to be part of that collective. And that person can maybe offer some critique or feedback to the brand as a whole, but it has to be like a 90-10 ratio, if not 95-5. Like, it has to be so extreme that like that person almost never says anything critical of the brand. And then in the one moment they're like, okay, like, you know me. I love when we changed inventory, and I love when they did this, and I love when we changed the registers, and I love the new dress code, and I love everything about it. But this one thing we're changing about scheduling, I really feel like we could look at it a little differently and maybe approach it, and maybe we can, do you think we could have some leeway with this? Like, and then they're not even like fully critiquing a thing. It's like a half critique that someone else has to take the ball down the rest of the field. And then of course the solution or conclusion is often, there's why am I using sports analogies? But like, there's a flag on the play and now we got to go back to the 10-yard line. Like, we're going to go right back where, the person who we know loves the brand stopped at the critique, and that's where we'll address the issue. We're not going to let Matt Copeland determine where we address the issue, because we don't feel like he he's not one of us.
Yeah.
I'm going to be thinking about this question long after the podcast ends. And just so everyone listening knows, if you see my LinkedIn after this post, guys, and you're like, why is Matt in Bora Bora? And why did he quit his whole life? If you rewind the episode back about 5 minutes, Becky's going to ask me a question that's going to send me on a career spiral. And you might think it's not that big of a question, but I think it's a really big question. Like, who is considered us and what determines that? And I do think that this topic that we're having is a big factor in who us is. Us is the people that agree that the company is amazing. And I mean, to use a very specific example, and I've said so many positive things about them that when I say critical things, I feel like I'm allowed because I'm doing the 95-5 dance. And that is, I loved my time at Old Navy. I have so many good memories. I have so many things to say about Gap Inc. that are positive about the way they've approached leadership. And I'm even doing it now in the preface to my critique, 95-5. But one of the things that I remember a regional HR person saying that really it actually is what started this idea of ego, actually. If you want to know the sort of birthplace of where I first was like, this is an issue. She said that Gap Inc. was like working in the military. And her analogy was basically to say that it's a very difficult job to run these like very complex, like many moving parts businesses that are part of, a collection of sister brands and big brands. And that Old Navy was the hardest, which I would agree with. And it was like the Marines, or maybe she said the SEALs. I don't know what she said, but she said, basically it was like the toughest thing. And what I realized in that moment was, by her saying that, she cut off a lot of areas where we could critique our jobs for being so difficult, because what she was saying is the difficulty is part of the business that is unchangeable. Like, you can't go to the Marines and be like, I can't do this mission, it's too hard, because you're a Marine. This is what you do. And there was such an ego attached, not only in what she said, but as I look around the room, people were like, yeah, we're in the whatever. This is the hardest it can be. And if you can do it, you're part of the thing. And when people left, we kind of acted like, they left because they're not a Marine. And I remember thinking, because I'm Matt Copeland, and I think about these things too often. And I was like, but why does it have to be the Marines? Is the difficulty a natural set of circumstances that are just a part of running a 17,000 square foot space with this much product turnover? Or are we artificially making it more difficult to run our business with too many changes, too many directives, too many policy decisions that are not in our control? And now we're just claiming that is the business. We are the Marines. And we're now actually going to use each store manager's ego actually to service us and get them to know that if they can hack this, if you can do it, you're the best of the best. And Marines don't complain. They don't whine about the mission or the exercise they have to do or how difficult it is. They do it. And then they are proud to have done it and be a part of a small cohort of people who can also do it. And it literally was in that moment that I knew I was probably going to eventually leave.
Yeah.
Because as much as I love Old Navy, as much as I've sat here in this chair or the other chair and said great things about them, I'm like, why? I love to be part of something. I love like a community and a collective, but I don't want to be part of a group that is so blinded by its own sense of importance that we can't do the real work to get better.
Yeah. Well, and I knew this was going to get somewhat philosophical and psychological. Again, we are not licensed psychologists, but I think we're both we're curious, especially about people and notice patterns. And I wonder how much of, I feel like when we first started talking, I was really eager to get to like, what is the thing? What is the problem in retail? Like, let's find it and then like name it and solve it. And I think as I was walking my dogs this morning, I was like, you know what? I think there are just a lot of landmines. Like there's just dozens, if not hundreds of like, oops, like we tipped into this and we didn't correct. Right? Like we didn't course correct. We leaned in. I'm wondering how many, because you had mentioned earlier, so many opportunities are being missed because of our unwillingness to call something a problem. And so this seems like it could be the source of a lot of chosen volunteer problem blindness. Oh God.
And I think that's why you mentioned 2 episodes I've said it. I feel like I might have said it more than that.
Yeah.
And if I didn't, I thought it in my head because it seems to be the resounding thing that I keep seeing where the company and the executive ego DNA helix dance that I'm going to just keep referencing is always standing in front of the thing they don't want to face. So, for example, when I was at Old Navy, so many things done well, right? So many things, especially regarding people. Like they were open. Like I could say to a regional HR person, the most honest truth that I had to offer, and it actually didn't get in the way of that ego for the most part, even though like Marines. Mm-hmm. But then there were certain things related to like diversity. I'm going to throw that out there that I critiqued. That they needed more of it, by the way, just so we're clear where I stand on the matter. Just I realized how that sounded. Because I truly believe, and I said this to them, and I said, I truly believe that a store's demographic makeup should match its community quite well. Yeah. And so there was a store that didn't, and it felt weird going into that store and seeing a lot of faces of leadership that didn't match the faces of the community, and I felt like that was something worth bringing up. And in that conversation, it was sort of like, well, you're in a different store and it doesn't matter to you. It's like, and so I think this, and like, because then what did I get after that? I got the full list of ways that Old Navy cares about diversity. And so it's in those moments that you're like, and now we stopped having a conversation because you've let, I think a lot of leaders and companies, that's what they do. Like, I think it's to different degrees how often the ego is allowed in the room with us. But I think in that moment, that HR person who I was speaking to we could have had a really great, amazing conversation about why it matters that leaders are leading teams, and it's all reflective of the community. And you don't have a bunch of, just to put it bluntly, you don't have a bunch of like white middle-aged managers from the suburbs managing a team of people in the city who reflect every racial demographic, and then you don't understand why there's like a manager-employee disconnect that you can't quite solve in this store, when to me the answer is right literally in front of your face. And so we could have had a really great conversation about like how quite frankly I could have even helped, because I had a very diverse team and a lot of them wanted to be promoted and would have worked there. Like we could have talked, and we didn't have to talk about my impact in it. I'm just saying we could have had a better conversation, but it was like in those moments, it's like something happens and then they're like, gotta protect the brand ego and maybe hers. I'm not sure. And we got to open the door and let it in. And now that the ego's in the room, we can't have a conversation anymore. Conversation is no longer happening. It is no longer a two-way street. It is a one-way street. And now you are going to get the corporate line that's on our website under About Us. Click on diversity. And I'm just going to read that to you verbatim. And now I feel like a jerk because I brought up the thing that apparently I wasn't supposed to bring up. And now also you're looking at me like now I have to be like, oh yeah, that all sounds great. Look at us doing the thing. And I don't want to do that. So I think it enters the conversation everywhere. I just think some companies, it's literally standing next to the executive every time they're in a room. And other companies, it's depending what the topic is, right? Like if it's something they're open to considering and their ego doesn't get involved and they haven't made their identity around it, then we can have an open discussion. But if it's something where their identity is intermixed, the ego gets involved, and that HR person probably felt very full of pride for her region and the diversity within it. And she felt that I was critiquing maybe her personally or her work personally or her impact, which is not what I was doing. I was actually making hey, let's get curious, to your point. Let's get curious about what does happen when you have these sort of like differences in representation across leadership and the team and then the community. And what does that look like and how do you fix it without, because you also like don't want to just have diversity just for diversity's sake, but it's also like you have a team of people who are from that community. You're telling me, and it was a big team, you're telling me none of those like 100 people can get promoted? Like, so, but we can't even have that conversation because now I'm getting the company line about like, in 2019, we now have 52% of our leaders are women. And now you're reading me like a demographic survey. Right. As if that matters to that store, because it doesn't. Because if you're that employee in that store, you don't give a crap about the demographic survey. So yeah, the ego prevents us from having the real conversations. And I think, again, depending on what brand you're in, I could give you every brand I've ever worked for. Not going to do that because no one wants to hear it. But I could give you every brand I work for and where their ego was like centralized. What was the thing that their brand identity and by extension, the executive identity was rooted in? And that was the topic or the thing that you were not allowed to critique. If you were allowed to critique other things, fine. But there's that other thing that you can't. And because Old Navy is rooted in, we care about people. We are a people first brand. One of our mottos is we do more than sell clothes. Well, we can't have this conversation because that disrupts what our identity is rooted in and how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about the brand. And if we start talking about that, does that mean that we're not who we say we are? And if we're not who we say we are, that's destabilizing. And now can any of us feel good about what we're doing? And if we can't feel good about what we're doing, how do we show up to work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might have said it about something before we started recording, but I think we were talking about leadership and we were talking about how it's not a switch, right? Like you don't earn leadership and then you're done. It's a practice. And I think what I'm hearing is that, these values that companies have should also be seen that way. But it sounds like they get to a certain point where they establish something they're really proud of, and then ego takes over and it's like, okay, protect this. This is our thing. This is our identity. No more growing, no more practicing here. This is done.
Mm-hmm. I think you nailed that. You nailed it on the head. Like that's exactly what it is. It's this, which is why I've always found like mission statements and values so interesting that sometimes you can't even reference them when you want to live them, because they're like, no, we did that already. Like, that's not a living value. That's a value that reached a point and then it froze in time. And here's our story of how we were founded, of, what we did. It's never like, here's what we're doing tomorrow to live the value. It's always, here's the story. And I think you're right about the leadership thing, or, referencing what I said. It's a practice, and it's an ongoing practice. It's a skill I think you can lose or grow. I think anyone can be a leader. I truly believe that, because I think it's something you flex and you learn and you adapt and you grow. But much like those values frozen in time, the second the ego tips in, your leadership capabilities are frozen in that exact moment. There's no more growing happening. And I think that's what's happening in a lot of brands. I think the ego tips into the brand, values frozen. Ego tips into the executive team, leadership frozen. And now our goal is not, how can we be proud of what we're doing? Our goal is, how do we protect what we have done?
Yeah. And that's, man, I feel like just a lot of dots are connecting, the lawyers coming in and just... Let me ask you, have you seen companies either reverse their ego status or been really proactive at keeping it in check?
Never reverse that. That's like asking me if I saw, Moses part the sea. So, no, never seen it reverse. I've seen companies really struggle internally with like we want to be open, but how do we be open and protect? I think I've lived that multiple times in multiple brands. I think when I was at Williams-Sonoma, and this is something Apir and I were talking about yesterday, like, life influences what we do in a store. Like, we don't exist in like some sort of four-wall vacuum. And so when COVID happened, when George Floyd was murdered, when, Black Lives Matter protests were happening around the country in America, these things could not be isolated, like, outside of the four walls of a store. They were happening in people's lives. Everyone has thoughts, whatever. Williams-Sonoma actually, in that moment, became more open, because they were like, wow, we need to listen, because we can't just those two issues are obviously separate, but like, for the protests and for all those things, it's like, we need to listen to especially our Black employees, and hear what they're feeling and saying and seeing, and what matters to them, and like, where can we be better? And then with COVID, it's like, well, this is affecting everyone, so we can't just like assume every store is the same and every community is the same, and, mask rates and all that stuff. Like, we have to approach things differently. So again, we have to listen, we have to be open, we have to hear. And because their ego can't get involved in that scenario, right? Because it's new. No company could be like, we've been through 27 pandemics and we know exactly what to do. It offered such a moment of humility that is so rare in retail and again, I've mentioned this in that episode about COVID, like, I'll just treasure forever, because I think it's never going to happen again in my lifetime. I don't think I'll ever witness it again. I don't want COVID to happen again. I don't want people to die. I don't want anything catastrophic to happen to anyone. That is not what I'm wishing. What I am wishing for is, I wish that companies could have a moment of that introspection and humility and questioning. Is the way we're doing this right now? And I think for the first time ever in my life, you saw companies actually referencing their values in real time a little bit, because they were like, okay, this is a moment we've never seen. So now we're open to like unfreezing the values for this moment, and questioning whether we're living them and what it means to have them on the wall. Does it mean anything at all? And so those are opportunities that I wish happened more. But I don't think I've ever, but that was like, a hopefully once in a lifetime pandemic. And so we kind of reopened. But what happened afterwards? Once everything was normal, we just closed ranks again. And now we're back to being the best cookware company that's ever cookwared on planet Earth. And that's who we are. We sell the best products and we love our clients the most. Don't ask questions. And even that, I actually think in some ways, and I never really thought about this until this moment, but for a company like Williams-Sonoma that traversed COVID so incredibly well, in my opinion, it actually made their ego worse afterwards, though.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like we were more open. We were more open for that minute. Then we looked back at how well we handled it. We're looking, other cookware companies are closing all their stores. They are not hitting the comp numbers we're hitting because maybe they laid off people and now they're struggling to hire them back. And we didn't do that. And we are amazing. We are the best. We knew we were the best, but this tested us and proved beyond a reasonable doubt that we are the best. And now we will go back to no questions can be asked.
Man, it's so interesting. So, because the amount of innovation and agility and decisiveness that came out of COVID was really exceptional. Mm-hmm. But when companies looked back, the reflection wasn't, wow, look at like when we were so open and forced to live in uncertainty and make decisions quickly, look at all the amazing things that happened when we listened and we moved. Mm-hmm. Instead, the takeaway was just, look how great we were back to we are so incredible. It makes me think that when it's ego, anything bad that's happening, poor retention, poor sales, that's external. And anything good that happens, that's me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, and I might have posted this in my LinkedIn post today because I posted something about retention because it's just, it's perennially on my mind. Like it's just never something that leaves the room when I'm at work or when we're having these conversations. It's always the thing that's back here, right? Like, because everything is retention is everything and everything is retention. It's like the air. And so what I posted today, it's like if companies ever were to say to shareholders what they say internally or externally about retention, people would not buy the stock. They would sell it. And if you were like, listen, we got some quarters coming up. There's not a whole lot we can do. Q1, January, it's cold, returns from Christmas. It's just a tough quarter. We just, you just have tough quarters. Every Q1, it just we could be down 15%. I don't know. It just is what it is. We really have no way to wrap our heads around what we can do to make this quarter better because it's just part of the game, Q1, it just sucks. If they said that, oh my God, first of all, that CEO is probably getting fired tomorrow. But that's the way we talk about retention because, again, shareholder value is definitely right inside that DNA helix of egos. Look at us, like we had a tough quarter, but we pulled it out. We did all the things. We did that. We made the tough decisions. The tough decisions being just laying off people and, ruining families and lives. But so anyway, those are the things that are said about that. But then when it comes to retention, the ego is involved, right? Because a lot of companies want to believe that they are, and I'm saying want to believe because I don't know that they really believe it. I mean, maybe they do. Maybe they're delusional. I don't know. That they treat people well or that they're the best with people or whatever. So they believe this issue is external. This is just retail is hard. Mm-hmm. People are done with dealing the hours or the customers or whatever. It's a tough job. We know it's a tough job, which is why you should have your ego that you're still doing it. And those other people left. And we're going to have our ego that we're doing the best thing we can because that's a non-controllable, or at least something that's very little impact. We treat it the way we treat shrink, right? People will steal. We don't want them to steal a lot, so we can try to prevent it with some customer service. Maybe we'll throw an LP agent here or there. to pretend we care about it. But yeah, we expect 2 to 3% shrink. That's normal. That's just par for the course. And again, that's all just wrapped up in ego protection, in my opinion.
Interesting. All right. Well, as we start to wrap up, I think this was really helpful for me. I think one of the most interesting things you said is like, and now we can't have a conversation. I think I need to like sit with that longer, because it doesn't matter how many brilliant, ideas anyone in your company has. If, and it's so interesting too that this ego gets built around the thing that the company cares about, because then it becomes the thing that can't be nurtured anymore. And if, in fact, it just starts to erode the thing that you're trying so hard to protect and keep behind glass.
And I think if you look at companies and their history and their timeline, I think you can see in results and actions sort of in tandem, like startup, we have pride. We're super excited. We're growing. We are the best. And we are growing, so we have to be adaptable, which means we have to listen, which means we can't let ego get in the too much of the way. And it really is a genuine pride for, we are the best at what we do. Like, we are the best athletic sneaker brand. We're new in town. We know Nike exists. We know Adidas exists. We know Puma exists. We know all these brands exist, but we are coming onto market because we believe we're doing something better. And in that time frame, clients are coming in and they're buying. Maybe they have some feedback. The company is like, okay, we're going to change and adapt. We're going to go into these new markets. In these new markets, we need to change and adapt. We're listening, but we are so proud of what we're doing. Then you reach a point of sort of stasis where you've grown, the peak of growing is over. And now it's about maintaining. And now you're proud of what you did in the past. It has nothing to do with right now. You're like, look at how much we've grown. Now ego's involved. Now we're ego. Now, here's what happens every time. Now, at some point, sometimes it's 1 year, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 10, there's a slump. There's a new sneaker brand. Or Nike has a resurgence because they went through the same patterns, okay? Now, you're on the downward spiral, and now you have to face, your ego you have to deal with it. We're not the best. We're no longer doing the best. Now, we have to be humbled. Now we're humbled. Maybe we get a new leader, maybe we don't. And now we have to be more open. Now we care what store managers think. Now we want to hear feedback from clients. What can we do? How do we make it better? Whatever. Yeah. Then we start to see it. We're doing it. We listened, we heard, we took action. Look at us. Now there's a resurgence. And what often happens in this resurgence is we go back to ego, and that ego often gets worse because we now, again, reflexively look back and we go, this is our founding story. Yeah, we had a moment where we struggled. It was tough. But we always pull it together. We pull it together, we become amazing, and look at us. We're on top of the world again. No one can stop us. We're the best. And so if you're a store manager coming in here, especially after we picked up the pieces and got to where we are, you don't get to tell us something you see wrong. You joined the best, and you should want to be a part of the best. And you should also think you're the best, because that's what it takes to be here at ABC Shoe Company. And then you just repeat that cycle ad nauseum, but every time you go back up and ramp up, the ego protection is worse and the listening is worse.
How can companies go from, this as needed, like, oh crap, we're in trouble, I guess we'll start listening again and start being innovative again and start, being more agile. Have you ever seen a company that's had like an always on, any kind of mechanism for listening, pivoting, that's remained open? Any tips?
I've never seen that. Not to say that it's not possible, and not to say that it doesn't exist. I mean, I haven't worked at every brand. I've job
Yeah.
hopped a lot, Becky, but not enough to have all the data personally.
Yeah.
But I do think the simplest thing that any leader can do. I think this applies to store managers too, because I think we do it as well when our teams complain.
Yeah.
And then we go into brand protection mode. I think the thing we can all do is to just pause.
Yeah.
When someone comes to you with a problem or feedback about the company or your leadership or leadership in general of the brand, just pause. And before you react, I mean, with some people, we might just be at the step where all I can ask is to just pause, and that's enough. Like, that's all you can do, and that's fine. That's step one. I think a semi-step to step two is pause and then ask yourself, what am I about to say? What is my instinctual response, and why is that my response? Like, if an employee comes to me and says, the app we use to look at our schedule is bad. It glitches. I can't switch my shift, whatever the thing is. Pause. Did you actually hear what was said? Did you hear it? Mm-hmm. How inconvenient this is for them, how awful it is. That's the first step, because the second step is, were you about to just say, well, we tested 6 different apps. The IT team determined that it was best integrated with our payroll software, and blah, 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 blah. Were you about to give them a whole slew of reasons of why you chose the best? Because we're the best, and you chose the best app. And this is the best app you can do. If you don't like this app, who do you think you are? Because that's a lot behind the ego asks that of other people a lot. Who do you think you are asking that? You don't get to ask that. That's not for you to question. And if that's going to be your automatic response, and that could all be true, right? Like, you did do your best and whatever, but how do you think about what was just said to you and respond in a way that's not dismissive, but also you don't have to make any promises to this part-time associate who complained to you as the VP about the scheduling software, but I think you should walk away and think, wait, was this our best? Like, was this the best choice we could make? Or were we on deadline? Or did someone recommend this company and we respected that person, so that's the one we went with, and maybe we should have done more due diligence? Right. So all of that to say, the first step is pause. Who is about to answer? I really feel like I'm in therapy right now. Like, who is about to answer? Is your ego about to answer? Yeah. Or is the empathetic human that you buried a long time ago actually listening, and is that person going to answer? I think that's really important. Who is answering for you? And if it's your ego or the brand's ego or the DNA helix of both, maybe you have a different response, or maybe you think about why that's so ingrained as your response. So pause. That's my advice.
I think it's solid advice. Just start looking for these opportunities to pause. They're probably coming across your desk every single day, multiple times. Find one. Find one today.
Yes, just one.
Just one today. Amazing. Any other final thoughts, Matt?
No, that's it.
Thanks as always.
Thank you.
You're listening to Dear Corporate, Love Stores.